In the heart of South London, where the streets hum with stories and memories, Jason Statham, the action star known for his incredible stunts and commanding presence, was about to experience something far more powerful than a high-speed chase or a dramatic fight scene. On a quiet afternoon, Jason found himself standing outside Sydenham High School, the very place where it all began. It wasn't a red carpet or the flash of paparazzi cameras that greeted him this time. Instead, it was a familiar sight of old brick walls, the sound of children's laughter echoing through the halls, and the memories that immediately flooded back. He hadn't been here in decades. Yet, as Jason stepped onto the campus, it felt as though he had never left. The very corridors he'd walked as a teenager, uncertain of his future, were now a reminder of how far he had come. His journey from a struggling kid to a Hollywood superstar was no ordinary tale. But there was one part of his past that he never forgot. One person who had made a lasting impact on his life. It wasn't a teacher or a mentor, but a humble janitor named George Wilkins. Jason could still see Mr. Wilkins, mopping the floors with the same quiet determination, offering words of wisdom between the hum of the vacuum cleaner and the shuffle of his worn-out shoes. Back then, Jason was a rebellious teenager, brimming with ambition, but uncertain of his place in the world. It was Mr. Wilkins who always told him, "You've got to keep pushing, boy. Don't let anyone tell you what you can't do." Now, standing outside the school, Jason had one burning question on his mind. Where is Mr. Wilkins? With his curiosity piqued, Jason decided to venture inside, hoping to catch a glimpse of the man who had once offered him guidance. He asked a few teachers, but no one seemed to know exactly where the elderly janitor had gone. Had he retired? Moved away? The school was bustling with students rushing between classes. Yet Jason couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something important. He was on a mission now, to find Mr. Wilkins, to see if he was still around, and to learn how life had treated him after all these years. Then, as he turned the corner near the gymnasium, Jason spotted a familiar face, and his heart skipped a beat. There, with his back hunched over a mop bucket, was Mr. Wilkins, still hard at work. Jason stood still for a moment, watching the elderly janitor as he moved with a slow, steady rhythm, completely immersed in his task. But something about him was different. Despite his age, Mr. Wilkins carried himself with the same quiet strength Jason had remembered. The janitor hadn't changed at all, but Jason couldn't help but wonder, why is he still here? His heart ached as he walked toward Mr. Wilkins, unsure what to expect, but knowing that whatever the answer was, it would change everything. "Mr. Wilkins?" Jason called out, his voice both eager and uncertain. The janitor looked up, squinting against the sunlight streaming through the window. A smile spread across his face as he recognized the voice. "Jason, is that really you?" Mr. Wilkins' voice was raspy, but warm, and it took no more than a second for the bond between them to rekindle. For a brief moment, time seemed to stand still. The bustling school around them faded into the background as Jason and Mr. Wilkins shared a moment of pure connection. But Jason's mind was racing. He couldn't help but notice the tiredness in Mr. Wilkins' eyes. At 80 years old, the man who had been there for him all those years ago was still working, still mopping floors, still pushing through the grind. Jason had to know why. Engage with us. What do you think of Jason's surprising return to his roots? Do you have a mentor who made a lasting impact on your life? Let us know in the comments below. Backhand index pointing down. And don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter to keep up with the full story as it unfolds. Newspaper. Jason Statham had always been a man of action. On screen, he could take on a dozen foes in the blink of an eye. But standing there in front of Mr. Wilkins, the humble janitor from his school days, something made him pause. There was no glitzy camera crew, no rehearsed script, just a moment of raw emotion with a connection that had been dormant for decades. "Mr. Wilkins?" Jason asked again, his voice a little softer this time. The years had passed, but there was no mistaking the man standing in front of him. His old janitor, now 80 years old, was still doing the same job Jason remembered from his school days. The elderly janitor stood up slowly, pushing his mop bucket aside as his eyes adjusted to the light. A crooked smile stretched across his face. "Jason?" Mr. Wilkins said, his voice cracking with disbelief. Well, I'll be, if it isn't young Jason Statham. My word, you've done well for yourself, haven't you? Jason chuckled, feeling a wave of nostalgia wash over him. The tough guy persona he wore in the movies seemed to melt away in the presence of Mr. Wilkins. He had been one of the few people who'd always treated Jason like a real person, not just a future movie star. Back when he was a teenager trying to find his way, Mr. Wilkins had been a steady source of support. "Yeah, I guess I have," Jason said with a sheepish grin. "But I wouldn't be here without people like you." Mr. Wilkins waved him off, returning to his cleaning. "Don't be daft, lad. I just did my job. But you were always going to make it big. I could see it in your eyes from the first time you walked these halls." Jason smiled at the thought of that. A young man, full of dreams and doubts, with an old janitor believing in him when no one else seemed to. It was something he hadn't thought about in years, but now, as an accomplished actor and producer, those words meant more than ever. They sat down on a nearby bench, an old wooden structure that creaked under their weight, and began talking. At first, they exchanged pleasantries, how Jason's career had taken off, how Sydenham had changed since he left. But eventually, the conversation turned to a question that had been nagging at Jason for some time. "Mr. Wilkins," Jason began, his voice serious now, "I've got to ask, why are you still here? I mean, you've been at this school for decades. Don't you want to retire and relax? You've earned it, haven't you?" The smile faded from Mr. Wilkins' face. He glanced down at the floor, his hands trembling slightly as he adjusted his uniform. There was a long pause before he answered, and in that silence, Jason could sense something more, something that didn't feel quite right. "I'd like to retire, Jason," Mr. Wilkins finally said, his voice quieter than before. "But I can't afford to. After all these years, there's not much left. No savings, no pension. Just a job and the people I help along the way. It's all I've got." Jason's heart sank. He had heard of situations like this before, but hearing it from someone he admired and respected made it hit harder. "You mean to tell me you're still working because you have no choice?" Jason asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. Mr. Wilkins nodded slowly. "It's the reality for many of us, son. You know as well as I do, not everyone gets to walk off into the sunset with a big retirement check." Jason sat back, the weight of his words sinking in. He had been so focused on his own success, on his busy Hollywood career, that he hadn't given much thought to the people who shaped him along the way. The unsung heroes like Mr. Wilkins, who worked quietly behind the scenes, offering guidance and support when needed most. The thought of Mr. Wilkins, who had selflessly helped students for so many years, still working at 80 was more than Jason could ignore. "I'm not okay with this," Jason muttered, almost to himself. "You deserve better, Mr. Wilkins. Much better." As the conversation continued, Jason found himself growing more determined. There had to be something he could do, something to show Mr. Wilkins the appreciation he had long deserved. But what could he offer? What could be enough to repay a man who had given so much without asking for anything in return? The truth comes out. As Jason sat there, the weight of Mr. Wilkins' words hung in the air. It was one thing to hear about pension crises or financial struggles on the news, but it was something else entirely to hear it from a man who had helped shape his life, yet had never asked for anything in return. Jason's mind was racing. He had spent so much of his life focused on the fast-paced world of action films, always thinking of the next big role or the next stunt. But here, in this quiet corner of his past, he was confronted with the reality that not everyone had the luxury of choosing when or how they retired. Not everyone had the comfort of financial security. And Mr. Wilkins, who had been the quiet backbone of the school for so many years, had fallen through the cracks. Jason cleared his throat, leaning forward slightly. "Mr. Wilkins," he began, his voice quieter now, more focused. "This doesn't feel right. You've been working here for decades. You've given so much to the school, to the kids, and you've never asked for anything in return." Mr. Wilkins gave a small, almost dismissive wave of his hand. "It's just what I do, Jason. People need work, and I'm here to provide it. This job, it keeps me busy and gives me a sense of purpose. And as long as I'm able, I'll keep doing it. Jason shook his head. But you shouldn't have to. No one should be working at 80 just to get by. You've earned more than that. You deserve a chance to relax, enjoy your life, and do whatever makes you happy. The janitor looked away, his expression softening. I never thought about retirement much. To be honest, I've always loved helping the kids. But truth is, it's not easy to make ends meet at my age. I can't afford to stop working, not with everything I've got left. Jason's heart ached. He knew firsthand how hard it was to make a living when you didn't have the luxury of fame or fortune. He had been through his own struggles as a young man, hustling just to make a name for himself in a world that often overlooked people like him. But he had always had a goal in mind, a purpose. Mr. Wilkins had always put others first, without ever thinking about himself. Jason took a deep breath. This was a man who deserved so much more than just admiration. He deserved action. I don't like the idea of you working because you have to, Jason said firmly. I want to do something about it. You've given so much. It's time for you to take a step back and enjoy life on your terms. Mr. Wilkins raised an eyebrow. And what exactly can you do, Jason? I'm just a janitor. After all, no one's going to change that for me. Jason stood up, pacing for a moment as the weight of the situation sunk in. There was something he could do, something that would make all the difference. I don't know exactly yet, Jason admitted, his voice determined. But I promise you, I'm going to make sure you're taken care of. You've helped me, and now it's my turn to help you. Mr. Wilkins didn't respond immediately. Instead, he simply watched Jason, his face a mixture of surprise and gratitude. For so many years, the janitor had just been another face in the background. He had never expected the spotlight, nor did he seek it. But to hear Jason, someone who had reached the highest echelons of fame, speak with such conviction, it was a humbling experience. I don't know what to say, Mr. Wilkins finally said, his voice thick with emotion. You've already given me more than I could ever ask for just by coming back and saying hello. Jason smiled warmly. That's just the beginning. 2 weeks had passed since Jason's conversation with Mr. Wilkins, but the idea of helping the elderly janitor stayed with him, fueling his determination. Jason couldn't just leave things as they were. He had a plan forming in his mind, one that would change everything for Mr. Wilkins and finally give him the peace and comfort he had so long deserved. The Sydenham High School assembly was scheduled for that afternoon, and the students and staff buzzed with excitement. Little did they know, this assembly wasn't just for a documentary filming, as they had been told. Jason had something much bigger in mind, something that would leave everyone in the room stunned. As the students gathered in the gymnasium, the atmosphere was charged with energy. Jason stood at the front, looking out over the sea of eager faces. He could see the familiar ones, the teachers, the administrators, but it was Mr. Wilkins who caught his eye. The elderly janitor had taken his usual place near the back of the gym, quietly observing the gathering. Jason knew that this moment was about more than just a public gesture. It was about showing the world that heroes didn't wear capes. Sometimes they wore blue coveralls and spent decades mopping floors without a second thought. "Good afternoon, everyone," Jason began, his voice carrying across the room. The chatter died down as the crowd focused on him. "Thank you for being here today. As many of you know, I spent some time here at Sydenham High, and I've been lucky enough to have had a lot of support along the way. But there's one person who has been the heart and soul of this school for longer than I can remember." Jason paused, his eyes moving to Mr. Wilkins. The janitor hadn't expected the attention, and the confusion was evident as he shifted uncomfortably on his feet. "Mr. George Wilkins," Jason continued, "has been a part of this school for decades. He's the person who's always here, no matter the time of day, quietly making sure everything runs smoothly. But what you may not know is that Mr. Wilkins is also someone who has had a profound impact on my life." The crowd murmured in surprise. Many of the students had never really noticed Mr. Wilkins before, but hearing Jason speak so highly of him suddenly put everything in a new light. Jason went on, "Mr. Wilkins is the kind of person who helps others without asking for anything in return. When I was a kid here, struggling to figure out my place in the world, he was the one who believed in me when no one else did. And that kind of selflessness deserves to be honored. Jason took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts. This was the moment. He had planned this carefully, knowing how much it would mean to Mr. Wilkins. Mr. Wilkins, Jason said, turning to face him directly, I know you worked tirelessly here for many years, but it's time for you to be able to enjoy the fruits of your labor. It's time for you to have the retirement you deserve. The crowd grew silent as Jason continued. I'm proud to announce that I've set up a full retirement package for you, including a pension, healthcare support, and a vacation fund, so you can finally take some time for yourself. You've given so much to all of us, and now it's our turn to give back to you. The room went still for a split second before a thunderous round of applause erupted. Students stood, clapping and cheering, while teachers wiped tears from their eyes. The overwhelming love and appreciation for Mr. Wilkins filled the room, and Jason couldn't help but feel a deep sense of satisfaction. He had done the right thing. Mr. Wilkins, his face flushed with emotion, stood frozen for a moment. He looked from Jason to the crowd, unable to speak. Tears welled up in his eyes as he finally whispered, I don't know what to say. No one has ever done anything like this for me. Jason stepped forward, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. You don't have to say anything, Mr. Wilkins. You've given more than enough to everyone here. Now, it's time for you to take it easy, enjoy life, and do whatever makes you happy. For a moment, Mr. Wilkins just stood there, overcome with emotion. The crowd continued to cheer, but he seemed lost in the kindness he had received. For someone who had given so much of himself to others, this was a recognition he had never expected. The applause in the gymnasium seemed endless, but for Mr. Wilkins, the noise was drowned out by a sudden, overwhelming sense of disbelief. For years, he had quietly lived a life of service, never asking for anything in return, and now, standing in front of a room full of students and teachers, he was being given something he never expected, a future beyond a broom and mop bucket. Jason stood next to him, the spotlight now not on his own career, but on the incredible impact of the man beside him. He could feel the weight of the moment, the significance of it all. Mr. Wilkins had spent a lifetime serving others. Now, it was time for him to enjoy the fruits of his labor, and Jason had made sure of that. The crowd slowly settled, but the energy in the room remained palpable. Jason couldn't help but glance at the students around him, many of whom seemed just as moved by this gesture as Mr. Wilkins. It was a powerful reminder that sometimes the greatest heroes weren't the ones in the limelight. They were the quiet, often overlooked individuals who made the world a better place simply by showing up and doing the right thing day after day. I don't know what to say, Mr. Wilkins whispered again, his voice cracking with emotion. This is more than I ever imagined. I never wanted anything like this. Jason smiled warmly. I know, Mr. Wilkins. But that's the thing. You deserve it. You've given so much. It's time for you to take a step back and enjoy life on your terms. A wave of realization washed over Mr. Wilkins. He had always believed that his role at the school was a small one, a quiet one. But now, with the announcement of his retirement package, he began to see that his impact had been much greater than he had ever realized. Over the next few weeks, life at Sydenham High School changed. The news of Mr. Wilkins' retirement went viral, with students and staff from all walks of life sharing the heartwarming story. Articles were written, social media posts flooded in, and soon the story of the janitor who worked tirelessly for decades was being celebrated across the world. For Mr. Wilkins, the outpouring of appreciation was overwhelming. He had never been one for attention or accolades, but seeing how his humble work had touched so many people was humbling in ways he couldn't express. But it wasn't just the public recognition that meant the most. It was a quiet moment of reflection, those personal conversations he had with students and teachers alike, who had now come to understand just how much he had done for the school and how much he had given without asking for anything in return. Jason visited Mr. Wilkins several times after the announcement, taking him out for coffee, hearing stories of his time at Sydenham, and listening to wisdom that only someone with his experience could offer. Mr. Wilkins, Jason said one afternoon as they sat at a cafe near the school, you've been through so much, and you've had an impact on so many people. But I think this new chapter is going to be your best one yet. You finally get to relax and enjoy the things you never had time for. Mr. Wilkins looked out the window, as if contemplating Jason's words. For the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of peace. He wasn't defined by his job anymore. His worth wasn't the broom he had pushed for so many years, but in the lives he had touched along the way. "You know," Mr. Wilkins said, his voice steady but with a hint of excitement, "I've always wanted to travel. Maybe I'll finally do it. See the world beyond this school." Jason grinned. "That's the spirit. Go wherever your heart takes you. You've earned it." It was a simple conversation, but for both of them, it felt like a turning point. Not just for Mr. Wilkins' life, but for Jason's as well. Watching his old mentor step into a new chapter of his life was a reminder of the power of giving, of helping others, and of paying it forward. Mr. Wilkins' retirement wasn't just about ending a job. It was about beginning a new life, a life filled with opportunities he had once thought were out of reach. And as the weeks turned into months, Jason kept in touch with him, making sure he had everything he needed for his travels, and even surprising him with a ticket to a trip Mr. Wilkins had always dreamed of, a visit to the small village in Italy where his ancestors had lived. It was a gesture that touched Mr. Wilkins in ways he never expected. What do you think? Mr. Wilkins' journey is just beginning. Do you believe it's important to recognize the unsung heroes in our lives? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Backhand index pointing down. And don't forget to subscribe for more heartwarming chapters in this inspiring story. Newspaper. Months had passed since Jason Statham's public gesture that had forever changed Mr. Wilkins' life. The janitor, now retired, had taken the world by storm. His story wasn't just one quiet service and hard work, but a community rallying behind a man who had spent decades making a difference without ever asking for anything in return. Mr. Wilkins had traveled to Italy, fulfilling his dream of visiting his ancestors' village. He sent Jason postcards every week, each one filled with new experiences and moments of wonder. His once quiet, routine life had blossomed into a series of adventures, filled with the joy of discovering new places, meeting new people, and most of all, relishing the time to do whatever he pleased. Jason had made good on his promise to help Mr. Wilkins, not just by securing his retirement, but by giving him the space to finally live his own life. And it didn't stop there. As the months wore on, Jason found himself thinking more and more about the impact that Mr. Wilkins had on him. The retired janitor had unknowingly shaped a part of Jason's worldview, the importance of selflessness, of quietly doing good work, and of always paying it forward. One evening, Jason was back in Los Angeles, working on his latest film. But even with all the action, the lights, and the excitement of his career, he found his thoughts drifting back to the lessons he'd learned from Mr. Wilkins. He called his assistant and asked for a moment to speak with the producer of his upcoming project. After a few minutes, he was on the phone with Mr. Wilkins. "How's the world treating you, Mr. Wilkins?" Jason asked, his voice full of genuine curiosity. "Better than I ever expected, Jason," Mr. Wilkins replied with a chuckle. "I'm seeing the world, meeting new people, and I'm actually getting some rest. It feels good." Jason smiled. "That's what I wanted for you all along. You've earned it." There was a long pause before Mr. Wilkins spoke again, his tone more thoughtful. "Jason, I've been thinking a lot. I can't thank you enough for what you did for me. But more than anything, it's the way you made me see that it's never too late to change, that we all deserve a chance to live our lives fully, not just survive." Jason's heart swelled. He hadn't expected that. "I'm just glad I could help you, Mr. Wilkins. You've given so much. You deserve more than just a simple thank you." "Well," Mr. Wilkins said with a hint of mischief in his voice, "maybe you can help me with one more thing." Jason raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" "I've always wanted to do something for the students at Sydenham. They've been great to me over the years. I was thinking, what if we set up a scholarship fund in my name? Something to help the next generation of students who may be struggling to get through school." Jason's mind raced, but he didn't hesitate. "That's a great idea. I'll help you set it up. It's the least we can do to give back to the students who are where we were, finding their way in the world." And so, a new chapter was written, not just in Mr. Wilkins' life, but in the lives of countless students who would benefit from the scholarship fund that now carried his name. The fund was designed to help students who had worked hard, just like Jason and Mr. Wilkins had, but who lacked the financial means to pursue their dreams. Mr. Wilkins had spent his life quietly serving others. But now, through Jason's support and his own newfound sense of purpose, his legacy would live on, helping future generations reach their potential. As for Jason, he realized that his connection to Mr. Wilkins had become more than just a story about giving back. It was about leaving a legacy of gratitude, kindness, and the power of recognizing those who often go unnoticed. Jason stood in front of the camera the next day, ready to dive into another action-packed scene. But somewhere in the back of his mind, the thought of Mr. Wilkins, traveling the world, giving back, and living his best life, would always stay with him. It was a reminder that heroes come in all shapes and sizes, and the greatest heroes often work behind the scenes.